The table was dressed in white linen and lit with flickering candles, all arranged beneath the low canopy of magnolia branches that arched over my parents' garden. It was their 40th anniversary, and everything was curated down to the antique silver and the jazz trio playing softly by the fountain. I sat near the end of the table, same as always, just close enough to refill the wine, just far enough to be forgotten. Sylvie had already regaled the table with 3 stories, each one louder and more self-congratulatory than the last. Her boutique had been featured in a local lifestyle magazine. A musician had stopped by. A model wore one of her custom silk wraps on Instagram. Dad beamed. Mom nodded along, her smile stretched thin with effort. When dessert was served, some peach tart her assistant had picked up from a bakery I used to pay invoices for, Sylvie leaned forward and said it. "How does it feel?" she asked, raising her glass just high enough to make sure everyone was watching, being the most useless one here. A small ripple of laughter moved through the table like spilled champagne, quiet, sticky, and impossible to ignore. Dad's chuckle was deep and unbothered. Mom gave one of those closed-mouth smiles she uses when she doesn't want to seem complicit, but doesn't plan to object either. Sylvie's husband smirked as if he'd heard the joke before. He probably had. I didn't look down. I didn't laugh. I just folded my hands in my lap, then placed them carefully on the table. My voice didn't rise above the music, but it cut through the evening like a cello string snapping. "How does it feel?" I asked, keeping my eyes steady on Sylvie, knowing the useless one won't be paying your bills anymore. The silence was immediate. Forks froze mid-air. Someone coughed. Sylvie's smirk broke, faltered, disappeared. I stood up slowly. The legs of my chair scraped sharply against the stone patio. No one stopped me. No one spoke. I turned toward the garden gate, the air thick behind me. I didn't wait for them to call after me. I knew they wouldn't. I walked past the fountain, past the flickering lights and polished silver, and into the dark street beyond. My heels clicked against the bricks as I made my way home, each step steadier than the last. They didn't know it yet, but everything had already changed. I was 14 when I heard the panic in my mother's voice behind the kitchen door. It was the first time I understood money could hum like a warning in the walls of our house. Dad had lost a major client and the mortgage was due. I had been working at Bellamy Books on weekends, shelving paperbacks and straightening display tables for $7 an hour. That night, I counted every dollar I had saved, $800 in total, and slipped the envelope onto my father's desk. He didn't say thank you. He called me reliable. The next month, Sylvie got a new convertible for her 18th birthday, a red one with a custom plate and white leather seats. The kind of car that turns heads even in Charleston's tourist traffic. She squealed when she saw it. My parents beamed. No one mentioned the envelope I'd left behind. By 17, I was taking extra shifts at a downtown cafe covering for students who needed weekends off. I gave Dad $500 for new drafting tools when he said his old set was barely holding together. He patted my head like I was the dog, then told Mom I was a walking trust fund. At 19, I was offered a partial scholarship to study art history in Florence. It was the first thing I'd wanted just for myself. I remember sitting on the back steps with the acceptance letter, rereading the words until they blurred. But Sylvie was behind on tuition again, something about unpaid fees and an apartment too expensive for her part-time gallery job. Dad sat me down in his office. "Family helps family, Corinne," he said, with that heavy gaze he used to close a conversation before it began. I didn't fight. I transferred the $5,000 I had saved for Italy into an account linked to Sylvie's school. She graduated a year later with honors and a portfolio my parents framed. I graduated from a local state school, balancing night classes with 2 jobs. At Sylvie's wedding, I paid the deposit on the reception venue. When she opened her boutique Juniper and Silk, I co-signed the loan and never saw the paperwork again. They called me helpful, practical, steady, but never by my name, and certainly never with thanks. It was a Tuesday night late enough that I'd already shut my laptop and brewed tea. I was in bed with a half-read book when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Sylvie's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Corinne." "Hey," she said, voice bright like we'd just spoken that morning. "I need a favor." I didn't say anything. I just waited. The boutique is doing great, really it is, but there's this space next door I want to expand into. The bank's offering a line of credit, but they want a cosigner. Just $75,000. It's nothing really. You're good with numbers. Can you help me make it happen? She said it like she was asking for a ride to the airport. I sat up. 75,000 isn't nothing, Sylvie. Oh, come on, she laughed lightly. You sit in that little apartment writing grant proposals all day. You've got investments. You don't even have kids or a mortgage. It's not like you're curing cancer. My throat tightened. No, I said. There was a pause. No. As in you won't help me. No, as in I won't co-sign a $75,000 loan for someone who hasn't repaid me for anything. The lightness vanished from her voice. You're being selfish. The word dropped like a match. I didn't argue. I ended the call. After the silence returned, I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I clicked through folders until I reached the one I'd named quietly without thinking. Records. It was locked. I typed in the password. Receipts, bank transfers, tax documents, tuition payments, business account top-ups, all traced back to me. I had scanned and saved everyone year after year. At the bottom was a contract signed and notarized dated March 2015. I stared at the final line. Ownership stake, 51%, Corinne Mallory. She had cried the night she signed it, overwhelmed and desperate. The business was collapsing. I had liquidated nearly everything I had to keep her afloat. She signed without reading. I never reminded her. She didn't remember what she gave me. But I had never forgotten. The silence after my question didn't break. It buckled. I watched it fracture in their eyes one by one. Sylvie blinked rapidly, her expression contorting like she couldn't decide whether to be offended or confused. My mother's hand hovered midair, still holding her wine glass. My father cleared his throat, but the sound had no weight. No one moved. I didn't sit back down. Instead, I took one step forward, my voice quiet but clear. You want to know how I feel? I asked. Let me tell you. I turned my gaze on Sylvie first. The tuition you couldn't cover at St. Martin's, that was me. The boutique's lease when your rent check bounced during lockdown, me again. Payroll for your staff for 3 consecutive quarters, all covered. I looked at my parents. The down payment on your new roof. The orthodontist. The catered reception for Sylvie's wedding. I signed every check. I filled every gap. Sylvie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I kept quiet because I thought that's what family did. I said, I thought being useful was the same as being loved. I thought if I worked hard enough, gave enough, I'd earn a seat at this table. My mother looked down. My father finally spoke. That's enough, Corinne. I shook my head. It's not even close. I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Inside are documents proving I've funded over $120,000 in expenses for this family since I was 16, including the contract that makes me majority owner of Juniper and Silk. Sylvie jolted upright. You're lying. I looked at her. You signed it. You were crying on the phone, remember March 2015. I saved your business. You just forgot I was there. My father stood up, his jaw tight. You're humiliating your sister in front of everyone. No, I said, gathering my voice one final time. I'm done hiding what you chose not to see. I turned toward the gate. The candlelight behind me flickered restless. No one followed. No one called my name. By the time I reached the street, the air felt cooler, and for the first time, the weight wasn't mine. The morning after the dinner, I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the scheduled transfer, $2,500 withdrawn from my savings account on the first of every month like clockwork. It had started quietly back when Sylvie's boutique was barely covering utilities. I hadn't told her about it. She just assumed things had resolved on their own. I tapped Cancel Transfer. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure? I clicked Yes. By the end of that week, the fallout arrived. First, it was a string of texts from Sylvie. Landlord called. Rent bounced. What's going on? Suppliers are freaking out. Are you late on something? Then the calls. Then the voicemails. Each one more frantic than the last. By Friday night, I stopped checking my phone entirely. Saturday morning, the buzzer rang. I walked to the intercom already knowing whose voice would be waiting on the other end. Corinne Sylvie snapped, "Open the door." My father's voice followed lower but edged with command. "We're not here to fight. We just need to talk." I buzzed them in. They entered like they still owned the place. Sylvie stormed past me into the living room, arms crossed. My father followed slower, his eyes scanning the space like he was looking for something to be disappointed in. "You cut me off," Sylvie said. "The boutique is a mess. My suppliers are threatening legal action. My landlord wants 2 months' rent immediately. You can't just—" "I did," I said, "and I won't be restarting it." "You don't get to just decide that," she snapped. "Not when we're this far in." "I've been deciding it for years," I replied, walking calmly to the side table where I kept the folder. "You just never noticed." I laid the leather-bound portfolio on the coffee table and opened it. Receipts, wire transfers, the loan agreement for the boutique, bank records, emails with her vendors, the contract with my 51% ownership notarized and dated. "Everything you've built," I said, turning the pages slowly, "has been quietly scaffolded by me. You can call me selfish, dramatic, whatever you want, but I'm done." My father leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing at the contract. "This isn't how family works, Corinne," he said. "We don't keep score." "No," I replied. "You just don't like when the math is out loud." They didn't speak for a moment. Then Sylvie grabbed the folder, scanning the pages like she was seeing my name for the first time. Her hands trembled, but she said nothing. "You wanted me to fix it," I said, folding my arms. "I just did." My father's voice sharpened as he stepped between me and the coffee table. "This ends now," he said. "You'll reinstate the payment. We can't afford this chaos, Corinne. You have the means. You will help your sister." He spoke like I was a child again, as if the years hadn't passed, as if I hadn't funded their peace for over a decade. As if obligation was my default setting. "I already have," I said, steady. "I helped when Sylvie was crying to me night after night, when she thought her boutique was finished, when creditors were circling and she couldn't make payroll. I liquidated my investment portfolio. $60,000, my entire cushion." He blinked. Sylvie's head jerked back. "You never said that she spat." "You didn't tell me. You didn't ask," I said. She turned to my father, eyes wide. "I thought it was a short-term loan. You signed a contract," I said. "You were desperate. I saved the business, Sylvie. And then I disappeared so you could pretend it was all you." Her jaw clenched. "You didn't have to humiliate me. You didn't have to bring it up in front of everyone. I brought up the truth. You brought the humiliation the second you called me useless." My father raised his voice. "This isn't about feelings. This is about unity, about protecting the family." "No," I said, stepping closer. "This is about power. You don't get to mock the person keeping the lights on. You don't get to call her selfish when she stops letting herself be drained." Sylvie laughed, bitter and brittle. "So this is revenge, some pathetic play for control?" "No," I said softly. "This is reclamation. For years I kept you afloat and let you pretend I didn't exist. I let you treat me like I owed you the air you breathe. But I don't. Not anymore." My father shook his head. "You're tearing this family apart." "I've been holding it together," I said. Quietly, invisibly. "You only noticed me when I said no." Sylvie clutched the portfolio to her chest. Her silence was louder than her shouting ever was. When they left, I didn't follow them out. I closed the door gently behind them and stood there for a long moment, hand still on the knob. My voice had finally landed, and I knew exactly where it would echo next. The manila envelope arrived on a rainy morning, heavy in my mailbox, like it already knew what it carried. Inside was a lawsuit. Sylvie was suing me, claiming I had coerced her into signing over the boutique,